Abigail Whitmore pressed her back against the cold wall outside the ballroom and listened to her father's voice carry through the door. "If anyone asks about my eldest daughter, tell them she is unwell." She did not cry. She had run out of tears 2 summers ago. Inside, music played. Glasses clinked. Her sister laughed the way only beautiful girls laughed, like the world owed them every good thing in it. And tonight, the wealthiest bachelor in the county had arrived. Abigail straightened her dress and walked away before anyone could tell her to. If this story already has your heart, subscribe to this channel and drop the name of your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The Whitmore estate had never looked more magnificent. Every lantern along the front path burned bright. The roses had been cut that morning and arranged in tall glass vases along the entrance hall. The kitchen had been working since before sunrise. White tablecloths, polished silver. Caroline's idea, every detail of it, and William Whitmore had approved every single one without asking a single question. He never asked questions when Caroline made requests. He only asked questions when Abigail did. And tonight, he had made one thing perfectly clear before the guests began to arrive. He had pulled Abigail aside in the narrow corridor near the back staircase where no one would see them, and he had looked at her the way a man looks at something he cannot fix and has decided to simply hide. "You will stay upstairs," he said. Abigail had been holding a small basket of garden herbs she'd cut herself that morning. Her hands tightened around the handle. "This is my home, Father." "It is my estate," William said. "And tonight I am entertaining the most important guest this county has seen in 10 years. I will not have—" He stopped, his jaw tightened. "I will not have distractions." She knew what the word meant. It meant her. "I won't cause any trouble," she said. "I only want to— Abigail." His voice dropped the way it always did when he wanted her to understand that the conversation was over. "Go upstairs. I will have Martha bring you supper." He walked away before she could answer. That was how it always ended between them. Him walking away. Her standing still. She stood in that corridor for a long moment, the herb basket in her hands, the sound of carriages beginning to roll up the front drive. She could hear Caroline in the next room, laughing with the 2 housemaids who had been assigned to help her dress. She could hear her father greeting the first arrivals in the front hall, his voice suddenly warm and full, and nothing like the voice he used with her. Abigail set the herb basket on the small table near the wall. She did not go upstairs. Chapter 12. She had not always been invisible in this house. She remembered a time she must have been 9 or 10 when her mother would bring her into the parlor during visits and introduce her first. "This is my Abigail. She has her grandmother's eyes." Her mother had a way of saying her name that made it sound like something precious, like the name itself meant something. Eleanor Whitmore had died when Abigail was 13. After that, everything shifted the way a house shifts after a storm. The walls still standing, the roof still intact, but something underneath no longer quite level. Her father had grieved in the way powerful men grieve by throwing himself into business, into land acquisition, into the management of appearances. And Caroline, who had been 11 and golden-haired and already startlingly beautiful, had become the thing he held on to. The proof that the Whitmore family was still worth admiring. Abigail understood it. She did not like it, but she understood it. She was not beautiful in the way that made people stop and stare. She knew this the way she knew the color of her own eyes, simply without drama, as a fact of the world. She was plain-faced and soft-figured, and she moved through rooms without turning heads, and for a long time she had believed that this was a failing she might eventually overcome, the way you overcome shyness or a fear of horses. But the years taught her otherwise. By the time she was 17, her father had stopped introducing her to visitors. By 19, her portrait, the small oil painting her mother had commissioned, had been moved from the front hall to the upstairs corridor where no guests would see it. By 21, her seat at dinner was at the far end of the table near the window, where the candles never quite reached. Not because she had done anything wrong, only because she was the daughter who did not help the Whitmore name shine. Chakwer. She found a place near the side entrance to the ballroom, a narrow alcove behind one of the tall curtains, and she stood there in the dark and watched. Caroline was magnificent tonight. There was no other word for it. Her silk dress was the color of cream, and her hair was piled high, and her laugh rang out across the room like a bell, clear and bright and impossible to ignore. Every man who entered the ballroom found his eyes moving toward her eventually. Every man except one. Nathaniel Carter arrived late. Abigail had heard his name 100 times in the past 3 weeks ever since word spread that he would be attending the Whitmore summer gathering. Nathaniel Carter of Carter's Crossing, Kentucky. 35 years old. Owner of the largest private landholding in 3 counties. A man who had built an empire from riverland and timber rights and wheat fields that stretched so far you could not ride the border in a single day. Unmarried. That last detail had set the entire region into a particular kind of fever. He did not look like a man accustomed to rooms like this. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, in the way of a man who had done real work, not just supervised it. His coat was well made, but plain, dark. He wore no jewelry. His hair was dark with some gray at the temples, and he had not bothered to style it elaborately the way most men of wealth did when they wanted to impress. He stood just inside the ballroom entrance and surveyed the room with the quiet, careful attention of a man who is always calculating something. 3 women reached him within the first 2 minutes. Abigail watched him nod politely. Answer, briefly deflect, with the practiced ease of someone who had done this many times before and expected nothing different tonight. Caroline drifted toward him. Eventually, she always drifted toward the most important person in the room, like water finding the lowest point. She smiled at him the way she smiled at every man she wanted to impress, and Nathaniel Carter looked at her the way he had looked at everyone else. Polite, distant, already bored. Abigail pressed her back against the wall behind the curtain and allowed herself a small private satisfaction. Then a voice came from directly beside her. "You're going to leave a mark on that wall if you press any harder against it." She startled badly. A man stood at the far edge of the alcove. She had not seen him there in the dark. Or perhaps he had moved quietly, she wasn't sure. He was one of Carter's men, she thought, or perhaps a business associate. He was older, weathered with the look of someone who had spent most of his life outside. "Forgive me," Abigail said, stepping back. "I didn't realize anyone was—" "No harm done, miss." He tipped his head slightly. "You're one of the Whitmore daughters." "Yes." He studied her for a moment. "The elder one." Something tightened in her chest. She waited for what usually came next, the flicker of surprise, the reassessment, the careful reorganizing of expectations. He just nodded. "Nathaniel mentioned you," he said. She blinked. "I beg your pardon," or asked me on the ride in who lived at this estate. I told him what I knew. 2 daughters. The pretty one and the— He stopped himself. "The elder one." "The plain one," Abigail said quietly. "You can say it." He looked uncomfortable. "I didn't mean—" "It's all right." She meant it. "What did Mr. Carter say?" The man was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Which one runs the house?" Abigail said nothing. She turned back toward the ballroom. Nathaniel Carter was still standing near the entrance, and he was no longer looking at Caroline. He was looking toward the far edge of the room where a young housemaid had dropped a tray and was crouching to collect it, and 3 of the female guests were stepping around her without a glance. Abigail watched him watch that. His expression did not change, but he did not look away. She slipped out through the side door before anyone could find her. The night air hit her face, and she stood on the narrow side path between the estate wall and the garden and breathed it in grass and honeysuckle and the faint edge of the river somewhere distant. She preferred this to the ballroom. She always had. She heard the door open behind her. She turned expecting Martha the housekeeper come to tell her father was asking for her, or more likely, come to tell her father was asking where she'd gotten to, so he could redirect her upstairs before anyone noticed. It was not Martha. Nathaniel Carter stood in the doorway. He looked at her. She looked at him. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then he said, "Miss Whitmore." "Yes," she said. She did not know which Miss Whitmore he meant. She assumed the question would clarify itself. "The elder one," he said. "Not a question this time." "Yes." He stepped out onto the path, letting the door fall shut behind him. He was even larger up close. She had to look up slightly to meet his eyes, and she was not a small woman. "My name is Nathaniel Carter," he said. "I know who you are, Mr. Carter." He almost smiled. It didn't quite make it all the way to his face. "Your father didn't introduce us." "My father doesn't often introduce me." The words came out more plainly than she intended. She braced for the pity that usually followed a statement like that, the soft eyes, the carefully worded reassurance that surely she was mistaken. Surely her father didn't mean it that way. Nathaniel Carter did not do any of that. He simply said, "I noticed." The bluntness of it surprised her so thoroughly that she had no response ready. "The man at the river crossing," he said. "James Hadley. You know him." She blinked at the change of direction. "The ferryman? Yes, I've known him most of my life." "He spoke about you on the ride in. Didn't know whose estate we were bound for, I don't think. Just talking." He paused. "He said that when his youngest girl got sick last winter, you came every morning for 3 weeks with food and medicine." Abigail said nothing. "He said you knew the names of all 4 of his children, that you'd helped his wife learn her letters." Carter tilted his head slightly. "He said you were the best woman in this county, and he reckoned not 1 in 10 people in that ballroom tonight had any idea." The air between them felt very still. "Mr. Hadley is kind," Abigail said carefully. "Mr. Hadley is a man who judges people by what they do," Carter said. "Not what they look like or who their family is. I find those men are generally right." He paused. "In my experience." She studied him. She had learned over the years to be careful with kindness from strangers. It was not always what it appeared to be. "Why did you come out here, Mr. Carter?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "Because you were the only person in that room," he said, "who wasn't trying to get something from me." "Joy," she expected him to go back inside. He did not. He stood on that side path with her for a long time, long enough that the music from the ballroom shifted from one piece to another and back again. And they talked the way she had not talked to anyone in a long time about land and weather, and the trouble with the river roads in summer, about the mill on the Whitmore property that had been running badly for 2 seasons, about a book she had read that winter, and whether he had read it too. He had not, but he asked her questions about it that made her think he was actually listening. "You manage this estate," he said. It was not a question. "My father manages it," she said. "Your father plans the parties," he said. "Who manages it?" She opened her mouth, closed it. "I help," she said. He looked toward the dark garden. "The eastern field, the rotation's wrong. I saw it on the way in. Someone changed it 3 years back, and it's costing yield. Someone ought to change it back." "I've told my father that twice," she said, before she could stop herself. He looked at her then. Really looked at her the way she was not accustomed to being looked at. Not like an assessment of features, but like someone reading past the surface of a thing to understand what lay underneath. "What did he say, Pam?" "He said he'd consider it." She paused. "He hasn't." "No," Carter said. "I expect not." The door to the house opened again. Caroline stepped out, and behind her, their father, and behind him, 2 other men Abigail didn't recognize. Caroline had clearly spotted Carter's absence from the ballroom and organized a search with the practiced efficiency of a woman who understood that the most important thing in any room is always the man she hasn't secured yet. Caroline's eyes moved from Carter to Abigail and back to Carter. The smile she arranged was perfect, warm, and surprised, and not at all planned. "Mr. Carter? There you are. We were all wondering." Her gaze landed on Abigail with the particular weight of a blade. "I see you've met my sister." "Miss Whitmore," Carter said, and it was addressed to Abigail, not to Caroline. A small thing. Probably no one else noticed. Abigail noticed. "We should get back inside," William Whitmore said, his voice carrying the forced ease of a man who was working hard to appear calm. He stepped between Abigail and Carter with the subtlety of someone rearranging furniture. Mr. Carter, there are several people I'd like to introduce you to. Abigail. He did not look at her directly. You should rest. You've looked tired all evening. She had not looked tired. She had looked fine. But she understood what he was doing, and she did what she always did. She nodded, and she stepped back, and she let them draw him away, back through the door and into the light and noise. She stood on the path alone again. She did not go upstairs. The next morning was early and cool, and she was in the kitchen garden before anyone else in the house had risen the way she always was in summer. She liked the mornings. The house was quieter. The gardeners came and went without requiring conversation. The world felt like it belonged to the people who actually worked in it. She was kneeling in the herb rows when she heard the horse. She looked up. Nathaniel Carter was riding along the east fence line, alone, moving at a slow walk that had nothing purposeful about it. He was not dressed for visiting. He had the look of a man taking the morning for himself. He saw her and stopped. She stood brushing soil from her hands. He dismounted and walked the horse along the fence toward her, and she moved to meet him at the gate because it was easier than shouting. "Morning," he said. "Good morning, Mr. Carter?" "You're up early." "I'm always up early." He looked at the garden rows, then at her. "Your father know you're out here?" "My father is asleep," she said. Something that might have been amusement moved through his expression. "You didn't answer the question." "No," she said. "He doesn't know. He doesn't generally know what I do before breakfast." Carter was quiet for a moment. He looked toward the eastern field, the one she had mentioned the night before, the one with the wrong rotation. She could see him looking at it, actually looking the way a man looks when he's calculating something. "Walk with me," he said. "I beg your pardon. The field. I want to look at it up close." He looked back at her. "Walk with me. Tell me what you see." She should have declined. She should have said something about propriety, about early morning and no chaperone, and what the neighbors might say. She had spent a large portion of her life worrying about what the neighbors might say. She opened the gate. "All right," she said. They walked the east field for the better part of an hour. She told him things she had never told anyone, because there had been no one to tell about the soil composition and the trouble with the drainage in the southwest corner, about the way the original fence line had been placed wrong 40 years ago, and cost the estate a quarter-acre of workable ground, about the mill and the water wheel and the gear mechanism that had been incorrectly replaced 5 years before. He listened. He asked questions, real questions, not polite ones, the kind that required her to think. At one point he stopped and looked at her with an expression she could not entirely read. "How long have you known all of this?" he asked. "Since I was 16, she said. "I started following the estate manager around when I was 15. He was a good man. He let me ask questions." "And after he left?" "He retired when I was 18. She looked at the field. "My father hired a new one. The new one doesn't appreciate questions." "You could run this estate," Carter said. She looked at him. "You know every piece of it," he said. "The land, the yields, the problems, the history. You know it better than your father does." "That doesn't matter," she said. "If no one will let you, let." The words came out flat, not bitter. She had long ago pressed the bitterness out of them through repetition. They were just true. Carter was quiet. They stood in the east field in the early morning. The grass still wet the sun, not yet high enough to matter, and neither of them spoke for a moment. Then he said, "I'm going to be direct with you, Miss Whitmore. I generally find it saves time." She turned to face him fully. "Please do." "I came to this gathering because my solicitor told me it was time I considered marriage," he said. "I am 35 years old. My property is large. I need someone who can manage a household that is more complicated than most people understand, and I need someone who won't spend her days trying to turn a working estate into a social performance." She said nothing. "I've been to 14 such gatherings in the past 3 years, he said. "I have met charming women, beautiful women, women with excellent families and excellent manners and excellent opinions about curtain fabric." He paused. "None of them could tell me a thing about drainage. Despite herself, she almost smiled. "What are you saying, Mr. Carter?" He looked at her steadily. "I'm saying I'd like to call on you, formally, with your father's knowledge." He paused. "If you're agreeable." The morning air felt very still. She thought about the ballroom, the curtain she had stood behind, her father's voice through the door. "Tell them she is unwell." The seat at the far end of the dinner table where the candles never reached. 24 years of being the daughter nobody introduced. "My father will say no," she said. "That's possible." Carter agreed. "He wants Caroline for you." "I know what he wants." He said it without particular heat. "I'm asking what you want." Nobody asked her that. In 24 years of being Abigail Whitmore, she could count on one hand the number of times anyone had asked her what she wanted. She looked at this man standing in her family's east field in the early morning. Serious. Plain-spoken. A little rough at the edges. Already she suspected far more complicated than he appeared. "I'll need to think about it," she said. He nodded. "Fair enough." He picked up the horse's reins and began to walk back toward the fence line. "Mr. Carter." He stopped, looked back. "The drainage problem in the southwest corner," she said. "It's not the soil, it's the stone wall along the creek bed. Someone built it wrong 30 years ago, and it's been redirecting water ever since." He was quiet for a moment. "How would you fix it?" "Pull out the center section of the wall," she said. 3, maybe 4 stones. Let the water find its natural line again. Seed the low ground in the fall." She paused. 2 seasons, and the yield goes up by 1/3. He looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said. "It would." He rode away. Abigail stood in the east field and watched him go, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Something quiet and cautious, and not quite hope yet, but close. She pressed it down. She had learned the hard way not to feel things before she was certain they were real. But she pressed it down gently this time. Not away. Just gently. And she went back to the garden, and she knelt in the herb rows, and she worked through the morning, the way she always did with her hands in the soil, and her mind running 3 steps ahead, and she waited to see what the day would bring. By midday, her father had heard. She did not know how. Perhaps one of the stable hands had seen them in the field. Perhaps Carter's own man had mentioned it. It didn't matter. William Whitmore came to find her in the small room she used for keeping accounts. The one room in the house that was entirely hers, that she had arranged herself, that held the ledgers and letters and estate records she had been quietly maintaining for 6 years without anyone formally asking her to. He opened the door without knocking. He stood in the doorway and looked at her for a moment with an expression she could not entirely read. Anger under the surface, she thought, and something else below that. Something closer to fear. "What did you say to him?" he asked. "We spoke about the estate," she said. She set down her pen. "About the east field, the drainage problem." "You had no business speaking to him alone." "He asked me to walk with him," she said. "It was early morning. We were in the open field." "Abigail." He came further into the room and his voice dropped, and she recognized this as the version of her father that frightened her most. Not the cold voice, not the dismissive voice, but the quiet voice that meant he was genuinely alarmed. "Nathaniel Carter is here for Caroline." "I'm aware of what you want," she said. "He asked to call on me formally." The silence that followed was very long. He said that, "Yes." Her father's jaw moved. She watched him work through it. Surprise calculation, the rapid reorganizing of a plan that had been very carefully laid. "He's confused," William said finally. "He doesn't understand the situation." "He seemed to understand it quite well," Abigail said. "He's a direct man. He said what he meant." "Caroline is." "Father." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "I know what you've decided. I know what you've always decided. But he asked me, not Caroline." William Whitmore looked at his eldest daughter. Really looked at her, possibly for the first time in several years, and she saw something move through his face that she could not name. It was not kindness. It was not recognition. It was something older and more complicated. Something she thought might be regret, if he'd ever learned to let himself feel it. He turned away. "I will speak to Mr. Carter," he said. "You can speak to him," she said. "But I'm 24 years old, Father, and what I decide is my business." He left without answering. She sat in the account room for a long moment, her hands flat on the desk. Then she opened the ledger. And she went back to work. Because that was what she knew how to do. And because she had learned a long time ago that in a house where nobody would give you a seat at the table, you built your own. One careful, quiet day at a time. William Whitmore did not speak to Nathaniel Carter that afternoon. He tried. Abigail heard it from Martha, who had heard it from the stable boy, who had been standing near the front entrance when her father sent a man to Carter's lodgings at the Hale boarding house in town with a formal written request for a private meeting. Carter sent back 3 words. "I'll call tomorrow." Not a question, not a request for permission. A statement. The kind a man makes when he has already decided what he is going to do and is simply informing others out of courtesy. Her father spent the rest of the afternoon in his study with the door closed. Caroline spent it in the parlor with 2 of her friends from the neighboring Aldrich estate, their voices rising and falling in the particular rhythm of young women who are furious but cannot say so openly. Abigail passed the parlor door twice and caught fragments, "Mr. Carter," and "Can you imagine?" and "Of all people." And she kept walking both times. She had learned early that Caroline's anger was like weather. It moved through and then it passed, and the best thing to do was not stand in the middle of it. She went back to the account room and worked until the light got bad. He came at 10 the next morning. Not to the front entrance. Not with a calling card sent ahead and a housemaid dispatched to announce him and the full ceremony of a formal social call. He rode up the main drive on the same dark horse dismounted at the post himself, and knocked on the front door like a man who owned property across 3 counties and did not particularly care whether the door was answered quickly or slowly. Abigail was on the front porch when he arrived. She had not planned to be there. She had been bringing a letter to the front hall for posting, and she had stepped onto the porch for a moment because the morning was cool and the air was good, and then she had heard hoofbeats, and there he was. He saw her immediately. "Miss Whitmore." "Mr. Carter." She folded the letter in her hands. "My father is expecting you in the study." "I know." He did not move toward the door. "How are you this morning?" She looked at him. The question was simple and genuine, and it caught her slightly off guard the way simple, genuine things often did when she was braced for something complicated. "I'm well," she said. "Thank you." "You sleep all right?" "Reasonably." He nodded as if she had said something useful. "Your father's man came to see me last night," he said. "Did you know that?" She stilled. "No. After the one he sent in the afternoon, he sent a second one in the evening." Carter's voice was even. "That one had a different message. He said that his daughter, meaning you, was being presumptuous, and that I should understand you had a habit of misrepresenting situations." The air in her lungs went thin. She had known her father would do something. She had expected something. But hearing it said aloud, that plainly in the clear morning air, was still a different thing than expecting it. "I see," she said. "I told him. Carter said that I had been in business for 15 years, and I knew when a situation was being misrepresented, and that I was capable of drawing my own conclusions." She said nothing. "I also told him that his second messenger should be the last one he sent." She looked at him, then really looked, and she could not entirely read his expression, but there was something in it that was not pity and not performance. Something steady, the look of a man who had made a decision and was comfortable with it. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me." He picked up his hat from where he'd set it. "It's a simple matter of honesty. I don't have much patience for the other kind." He went inside. She did not hear what passed between Nathaniel Carter and her father in the study. What she knew was this: the meeting lasted 40 minutes. When Carter came out, he stopped in the front hall, and asked Martha where he might find Miss Whitmore, and Martha, bless her, did not ask which Miss Whitmore. She sent him to the account room. He knocked this time. "Come in," she said. He stood in the doorway, looked at the ledgers spread across the desk, at the estate maps pinned to the wall, at the rows of carefully organized records that she had been maintaining since she was 18. He was quiet for a moment. "Your father agreed to allow me to call on you formally," he said. Something she had been holding for 2 days loosened just slightly. "Did he?" He was not happy about it. "No," she said. "He wouldn't be." Carter came into the room and stood on the other side of the desk and looked at the maps on the wall. The property lines, the field divisions, the marks she had made in pencil over the years, noting changes, problems, things that needed attention. "He agreed because refusing me would have cost him something he cares about more than his preferences," Carter said. He said it without cruelty, plainly the way he said everything. "There are 2 notes on the Whitmore property held by a bank in Richmond. I did not know that when I arrived here. I know it now." Abigail set down her pen. "My father told you that?" "No?" Carter looked at her. "I have a man in Richmond who tells me things. I asked him last night after the second messenger arrived because I wanted to understand what I was walking into." He paused. "The notes are 3 months past due." The account room felt very quiet. She had known about the notes. She had known for 8 months, since she had found the correspondence tucked inside a ledger her father had left unlocked. She had tried to raise it with him once, carefully, obliquely suggesting that perhaps the estate accounts needed review, that perhaps there were expenditures that could be reduced. He had told her to mind her place. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad enough," Carter said. "Not past saving, but close." He looked at her steadily. "Does your father know that you know?" "No." "Are you going to tell him that you know?" "I don't know yet." She was quiet for a moment. "He'd take it badly." "He'd take it badly because it would mean admitting that you've been seeing the estate more clearly than he has for years," Carter said. "That's my guess." It was not a guess. They both knew that, but she appreciated that he called it one. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. He pulled out the chair across from her desk and sat down, which no one ever did. That chair was always empty, always the chair that visitors didn't use because nobody visited the account room. And he set his hat on the desk like a man settling in. "Because you're going to need to know it," he said, "when you're deciding whether to accept my calling on you." She looked at him carefully. "And why does it affect my decision?" "Because I want you to understand clearly what I am and what I'm offering," he said. "I am not a romantic man, Miss Whitmore. I am a practical one. I have a large estate in Kentucky, and it needs management that my current staff cannot provide, and that I do not have time to provide myself. I need a partner in the actual sense of the word, someone who can run a household that is effectively a small town, who can make decisions under pressure, who understands land and accounts and people." He paused. "What I am offering you is a way out of a situation that is going to become very difficult in the next year. And what I am asking from you is what you've already been giving this estate for years, except directed somewhere that will actually benefit you." The room was very still. "That is the most unromantic proposal I have ever heard," she said. Something shifted in his expression. Almost a smile. Not quite. "It's not a proposal. Not yet. It's an explanation of terms." "And the terms are," she said slowly, "that you want a wife who is useful." "I want a wife who is herself," he said. "And I have seen enough in the past 2 days to think that yourself is considerable." He stood, picked up his hat. "Think about it. I'll call again on Thursday." He walked to the door. "Mr. Carter?" He stopped. "What happens," she said, "if I say no?" He turned back, looked at her straight. "Then I say good day, and I go back to Kentucky, and I hope things work out well for you." He paused. "And I think about that drainage problem in your southwest corner for the rest of the year." He left. Abigail sat at her desk for a long time after the sound of hoofbeats faded down the drive. Then she picked up her pen and she could not concentrate on a single thing for the rest of the morning. Caroline came to her room that night. This alone was remarkable. Caroline had not come to Abigail's room voluntarily since they were children. She knocked, also remarkable, and opened the door without waiting for an answer, which was less so. She was still beautiful, even undressed for the evening, even with her hair down. Abigail had never quite understood how some people managed that, how beauty followed them into the private hours, as well as the public ones. "I need to talk to you," Caroline said. "All right." Abigail set aside the book she'd been reading. "Sit down." Caroline did not sit down. She crossed to the window instead, and stood there, her arms folded, looking out at nothing. Abigail waited. She had learned years ago that Caroline required a moment of dramatic composition before she could say anything she actually meant. "Father is furious," Caroline said. "I know. He said you manipulated Mr. Carter." She turned from the window. "Did you?" "No. He said you went out to the field alone with him, that you deliberately—" "He asked me to walk with him," Abigail said. "In the morning, in a field visible from the road. I walked with him." Caroline's jaw tightened. "Do you know how this looks?" "I don't particularly care how it looks." The words surprised both of them. Abigail felt it, the slight shock of having said something she'd been thinking for years out loud, plainly without softening it. Caroline stared at her. "Abby, I'm 24 years old," Abigail said. "I have run this household's accounts for 6 years without being asked or paid or thanked. I have watched Father seat me at the end of the table and move my portrait and tell visitors I was unwell. I have been managed and minimized and arranged around for as long as I can remember. Caroline, and I am tired of caring how it looks." She stopped. She was breathing slightly faster than usual. "Mr. Carter asked to call on me. I said I would consider it. That's the whole of it." Caroline was quiet for a long moment. Something moved through her face, something more complicated than Abigail had expected. Not just anger. Something under the anger that was harder to look at. "He was supposed to choose me," Caroline said. Her voice had dropped. The performance had gone out of it, and what was left was smaller and more honest and almost painful. "He was supposed to choose me, Abby. Father has been planning this for months. He owes money to half the county, and Nathaniel Carter is the only man in the region rich enough to—" She stopped. "To fix it," Abigail said quietly. Caroline said nothing. "I know about the notes," Abigail said. "I've known for 8 months." Her sister's face went through several things very quickly. Surprise, then a flash of something that might have been shame. Then the armor going back up, piece by piece. "Then you understand," Caroline said, "why this matters." "I understand why Father wants it," Abigail said. "That's not the same thing. He's going to lose the estate." "Maybe." Abigail looked at her steadily. "Or maybe there are other ways to address the situation that don't involve selling one of us." The word landed hard. She had not entirely meant to use it, but she did not take it back. Caroline flinched. "That's not what this is," she said, but her voice had no force behind it. "Isn't it?" Abigail said, not cruelly, just honestly. Her sister stood at the window for a long moment. Then something went out of her, the tension, the performance, some part of the careful structure she maintained at all times. She looked for just a moment like the 11-year-old who had lost her mother and not known what to do about it. "I don't know what to do," Caroline said, very quietly. Abigail looked at her sister. She thought about saying, "You should have been kinder. You should have seen it sooner. You have spent 22 years learning to be beautiful and ornamental, and you have let Father teach you that your face was your only asset, and now you are discovering that assets depreciate and you have nothing else." She thought all of that. She said none of it. "Go to sleep, Caroline," she said gently. "It'll look different in the morning." Her sister left. Abigail sat in the quiet room and felt the complicated weight of the evening settle over her. Not triumph, not anger. Something more tired and more human than either of those things. She thought about Nathaniel Carter and his unromantic explanation of terms and the way he had sat down in the chair that nobody ever sat in. She thought about the east field and the drainage problem and the wall of stones along the creek bed. She blew out the lamp, and she lay in the dark and did not sleep for a very long time. Thursday came. He rode up at 10 again, same horse, same plain coat. Martha let him in, and he went directly to the account room. He did not ask. This time, he simply knew where she would be, and he knocked, and she said, "Come in," and he sat down in the same chair. "You've been thinking," he said. "I have." And she looked at him across the desk. She had spent 4 days thinking about the notes in Richmond, and her father's plan, and Caroline's face in the lamplight, and the east field, and the account books, and 24 years of being the daughter nobody introduced. She had made a list, because she always made lists. 2 columns, reasons and concerns. The concerns column was longer, but the reasons column was the one that mattered. "I have questions first," she said. "Ask them." "Your estate in Kentucky," she said. "How many people work it?" He answered without hesitation. 43 permanent staff, 12 seasonal. I run crops on the north and east, acreage timber on the west, and I have 3 mill operations on the river. "And your household staff?" 8. They're good workers. The housekeeper has been with me 12 years. She runs a tight establishment. "Who manages the accounts?" "I do currently, with a man named Reston who handles the ledgers." He paused. "He's accurate, but he's not imaginative. He doesn't look for problems, he only records them after they've happened." "That's a significant flaw in an estate that size," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "It is." She asked 7 more questions. He answered all of them with the same direct economy. No embellishment, no salesmanship. She appreciated that more than she could easily say. Then she asked the one she had been circling around. "What happens at the end of a year?" He was quiet for a moment. "I told you this was a contract arrangement," he said. 1 year. After that, if either party wishes to dissolve it by mutual agreement, that can be arranged. Legal provision is made for your financial independence regardless of the outcome. You've already had your solicitor draw this up. The framework of it. Yes. She looked at him. You were confident I'd say yes. No? He said it plainly. I was prepared in case you did. Those are different things. He held her gaze. I don't assume, Miss Whitmore. I prepare. She was quiet for a moment. Outside somewhere in the house, she could hear her father's voice. He was speaking to someone. She could not make out words, just the cadence of it. The particular tone he used when he was performing authority, he wasn't sure he still had. There is one more thing, she said. Tell me. My father. She chose her words carefully. He is going to lose this estate. The notes are past due, and he has no plan that doesn't involve someone else rescuing him. If I leave, if I am no longer here to manage the accounts and the household and the actual running of things, it will accelerate the problem significantly. Carter watched her. Yes, he said. I expect it would. I need you to understand, she said, that I'm not using this as leverage. I'm telling you, because you should know that when I walk out of this house, things here will get worse. And I will have to live with that. He was quiet for a long moment. You love this land, he said. It was not what she expected him to say. She felt something tighten in her chest. I've managed it since I was 18. It's hard not to. But your father doesn't see it. No. And Caroline can't do what you do. No. He nodded slowly. I can't fix what your father has done, he said. And I won't insult you by pretending I can. But I can tell you that what you're describing, that sense of obligation to land and people that your own family doesn't see, that's not weakness, Miss Whitmore. That's the quality I've been looking for 3 years and haven't found. She pressed her hands flat on the desk. Yes, she said. He stopped. Yes, she said again. I'll accept your calling on me formally, and I will hear the terms of your arrangement, and if they are what you say they are, I will agree to them. She looked at him steadily. I have spent 24 years being managed around. I think it's time to do something else. Something happened in his expression, a slight shift. Something that was not quite relief but was adjacent to it, as though he had been holding something and had just been allowed to set it down. All right, he said. I'll need 2 weeks before any formal announcement, she said. There are things here I need to organize before I go. Accounts that need to be in order. Information that should be written down for whoever manages this estate after me. You're going to do that even now, he said. Someone has to, she said simply. The land didn't do anything wrong. He looked at her for a moment, with an expression she could not entirely name. 2 weeks, he said. I'll stay in town. I have business with the county recorder anyway. He stood. He picked up his hat. He was at the door before she thought of it. Mr. Carter. He turned. I was there genuinely a conversation with James Hadley on the road in... She paused. Or was that something you said because you thought it would help? He did not hesitate. Hadley's a real man, and every word I told you he said is true. I can take you to him, and you can ask him yourself if you'd like. She nodded once. I believe you. Good. He held the door. Because I have no talent for fiction, and I don't intend to start. He was gone. Abigail sat in the empty account room and let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for a week. Outside, her father's voice had stopped. Somewhere above her, Caroline's door opened and closed. The estate made its quiet summer sounds around her, the creak of the old house, the distant voices of the workers, the heat of July settling into the wooden bones of the building. She opened the account ledger. She picked up her pen. She had 2 weeks of work to do, and for the first time in years, she had something to do it for. She did not tell her father she had said yes. She did not need to. By that evening he had found out somehow from a servant. She suspected, or perhaps Carter's business with the county recorder was more visible than she'd imagined. Either way, William Whitmore appeared in the doorway of the account room at dusk with a face she had never quite seen on him before. Not angry. Past anger. Something flattened and cold underneath it. You've agreed, he said. I have. After everything I told you. After everything you told me, she confirmed. He came into the room slowly and stood in front of the desk, and she did not stand up to meet him. She stayed seated. It was a small thing, and she knew it, and she did it anyway. Abigail. His voice had changed. The authority had gone out of it, and what was left sounded older. Worn. Do you understand what you're doing to this family? I'm accepting a formal courtship from a man who asked for it, she said. I don't understand how that's being done to the family. Carter came here for Caroline. Carter came here for himself, she said. He made his own choice. I didn't arrange it, and I didn't manipulate it, and I'm not going to apologize for it, Father. His face tightened. The notes, she said. In Richmond. I know about them. The silence was absolute. Her father looked at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before, and she realized with a slow, complicated feeling she could not name that it was the look of a man who has been caught. Not just caught doing something wrong. Caught by someone he had believed incapable of catching him. How long? He said. 8 months. He sat down, not in the visitor's chair, but on the small bench along the wall, the bench that held the overflow ledgers. He sat there like a man whose knees had decided without consulting him. I tried to tell you, she said, not viciously, quietly. In January, I tried to suggest a review of the accounts. You told me to mind my place. He said nothing. The Eastfield yields are down 12% from 3 years ago because of the rotation error, she continued. The mill gear is wrong, and it's costing time and product both. The southwestern drainage issue has been losing viable soil for 30 years. She paused. I wrote all of this down. It's in the account room. It has been in the account room for years. I will leave it all in order before I go. Before you go, he repeated. I'm going to marry Nathaniel Carter, she said. Not harshly, just clearly. If his terms are what he says they are, and I believe they are, I'm going to marry him, and I'm going to Kentucky, and I'm going to do what I've always done except on land that is large enough to matter, and for a man who actually wants it done. She held her father's gaze. I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you what's going to happen. William Whitmore looked at his eldest daughter for a long time. Something moved through his face, slow and old and too late. She recognized it now. She had named it wrong before. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't regret, not exactly. It was the specific grief of a man who is seeing something clearly for the first time, precisely because he is about to lose it. Your mother, he said. Abigail waited. She used to sit there, he said. He was looking at the chair behind the desk, her chair. She used to sit there in the evenings and work the accounts, and I never understood what she was doing. I thought she was just keeping herself occupied. He stopped. His jaw worked. After she died, I hired Marsh to manage the books. He was not as good as she was. No, Abigail said. He wasn't. Her father looked at her with the weight of a man who has understood something 12 years too late. You're like her, he said. I know, she said. I didn't. He stopped. I know, she said again. The room held the particular quality of evening, the light going copper-colored through the windows, the day's heat beginning to ease. They sat in it together, the two of them, with all the years of wrong decisions between them, and no way now to collect them up and do them over. The notes, he said finally. Write to the bank, she said. Be honest about the situation. Request a restructured payment schedule. They'd rather work with you than foreclose. Foreclosure is expensive and slow. She paused. Fix the mill gear. It's a 2-day job, and it'll increase output enough to matter. Correct the rotation on the east field this fall. Plant winter wheat in the section that's been running corn. Talk to the workers, Father. Actually talk to them. They know things about this land that never make it into the ledgers. He listened. It was the first time in as long as she could remember that he actually listened. I'll leave everything written down, she said. Every problem I've identified, every solution I'd recommend, every contact and correspondence that matters. 2 weeks. He nodded slowly. He looked very tired. Will you... He stopped. Started again. Will you be all right in Kentucky? She looked at him. It was a small question, and it was 12 years late, and it was, she thought, the most honest thing he had said to her in all of that time. Yes, she said. I think I will be. He stood. He moved toward the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and stood there a moment with his back to her. I'm sorry, he said. She let the words sit. I know, she said. He left. Abigail sat alone in the account room as the last of the evening light went out of the windows, and she felt the strange, uneven weight of a chapter that was closing without any of the satisfaction she had imagined it might have. Just the hollow, complicated ache of being right about something for a very long time, and finding that being right about it at the end did not feel like winning. She picked up her pen. She opened to a fresh page, and she began to write. The 2 weeks passed, the way hard work always passes, faster than expected, and slower than hoped. Each day full enough that there was no room to think too carefully about what came at the end of it. Abigail wrote everything down. She filled 4 separate notebooks. The first covered the estate accounts in full, every debt, every asset, every payment schedule, and outstanding obligation organized by date and urgency. The second covered the land itself, field rotations, soil conditions, the drainage problem in the southwest corner, with a hand-drawn diagram of where the stones needed to come out and how the water would move after. The third covered the staff names' histories, the small human details that never appeared in formal records but determined whether a household ran smoothly or fell apart. Which workers could be trusted with responsibility and which needed supervision. Which ones had family situations that affected their availability in harvest season. Which ones had been underpaid for years and would leave if nothing changed. The fourth notebook she hesitated over. It was the one about the mill. She had been tracking the mill's output for 3 years quietly, without being asked, because the numbers had never added up to her, and she had eventually traced the discrepancy to the gear mechanism, and to something else. Something she had not been entirely sure about until the 5th month, when she found the secondary ledger that the estate's mill manager, a man named Griggs, had been keeping separately and not reporting to her father. Griggs had been skimming, not enormous amounts, careful amounts. The kind of careful that suggested he had been doing it for a long time and had learned exactly how much could disappear without triggering alarm. She had said nothing about it for 3 months because she had not known what to say or to whom. Her father would not have believed her, or he would have believed her and handled it badly. Confronted Griggs publicly, created a scene, made enemies out of the remaining mill workers who respected the man, even if she couldn't. Now she wrote it all down. Every figure, every date, every discrepancy cross-referenced against the output records. She organized it with the precision of a legal document because she understood that it was in effect exactly that. She left the 4th notebook on top of the others on the account room desk. She put her father's name on a folded piece of paper on top of it all. She did not tell him what was in it. She let the work speak for itself. Carter came twice more during those 2 weeks. The first time was brief. He brought his solicitor, a narrow, careful man from Lexington named Aldous Webb, who laid the contract terms on the account room desk and walked through them with the practiced speed of someone who had done this many times and knew which parts required explanation and which parts people only thought they needed explained. Abigail read every word. She asked 12 questions. Webb answered 9 of them satisfactorily. For the other 3, she asked for amendments, and she stated exactly what she wanted the amendments to say, and Webb looked at her over his spectacles with an expression that suggested he was recalibrating something. Carter watched the whole exchange from the chair by the wall without saying a single word. When Webb left to redraft the relevant sections, Carter looked at her. "You've read contracts before," he said. "My father had me copy correspondence when I was younger," she said. "Legal letters, land agreements, that kind of thing. I paid attention." Most people don't. Most people aren't in a position where the details matter quite so directly to them. He almost smiled. Fair point. The amended contract came back 2 days later. She read it again. It said what she had asked it to say. She signed it. The second visit was different. He came in the late afternoon, without Webb, without formal purpose. He came the way a man comes when he has thought of something and wants to say it before he talks himself out of it. She was in the garden when he arrived. Martha brought her the news, and she came around the side of the house to find him standing on the front path, hat in hand, not quite at ease in the way he usually was. "Mr. Carter," she said. "Miss Whitmore." He looked at her. "I wanted to ask you something." "Ask." He was quiet for a moment. It was the first time she had seen him take time before speaking, and it shifted something in the way she looked at him, made him seem less like a force of nature and more like a man. "My estate," he said. "Carter's Crossing. I want you to know what you're coming to." He paused. "Not the acreage and the staff numbers. You know those. I mean what it's like." Another pause. "It's not a social place. I don't entertain often. The neighbors are good people, but they're spread out. The nearest town is 40 minutes by horse, and the road is bad in spring." He looked at her steadily. "I want to make sure you know that before you come. Because it's not like this." He gestured slightly toward the house. Toward the road. Toward the general shape of Virginia in the summer of 1816, the proximity and the society of it, the calls and the gatherings and the constant machinery of other people's opinions. "Is that a warning?" she asked. "It's a fact," he said. "I want you to come in with both eyes open." She looked at him, this serious, plain-spoken, slightly awkward man, who had come to her side door instead of the front, who had sat in the chair. Nobody sat in, who had told her about drainage and land notes and mill output, with more care than he seemed to know what to do with, and she felt something shift in her chest. Something quiet and specific. "Mr. Carter," she said. "I have spent 24 years in a house full of people where no one saw me. I think I can manage 40 minutes of bad road." He looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said. "I reckon you can." Mud. The wedding was small by necessity and by choice. Her father arranged it with the bare minimum of ceremony required by propriety a Thursday morning. The local minister, the parlor of the Whitmore estate, a gathering of no more than 30 people, half of whom were business acquaintances of her father's, who attended because Carter's name was on the invitation and not because anyone cared particularly about Abigail. Caroline was there. She stood to Abigail's left in the parlor and held the small bunch of herbs and garden flowers that Abigail had cut herself that morning, because there had been no time and no particular point in ordering something elaborate. Caroline held them carefully like something fragile, and she looked at Abigail during the ceremony with an expression that Abigail could not read and did not have time to try to. Her father stood stiff and formal and spoke to Carter twice before the ceremony, and not at all after. He shook Carter's hand at the end with the resolute air of a man completing a business transaction he had not wanted and could not avoid. Carter stood through all of it with his characteristic steadiness present, quiet, attentive in the way of a man who notices everything and reacts to very little. When the minister spoke his portion, Carter said his words clearly and without embellishment, and when Abigail said hers, he watched her face with the focused attention he gave to everything, and she found to her surprise that it did not unsettle her. It should have. She had expected to be frightened. She was not frightened. She was something else, something that felt more like the morning she stood in the east field and showed him the drainage problem. Like the particular steadiness that comes from moving through the world in the direction you have chosen rather than the one that was chosen for you. When it was done, Carter offered his arm and she took it, and they walked out of the parlor into the front hall, and the 30 guests rearranged themselves for the small reception. And for the first time in 24 years, Abigail Whitmore walked through the Whitmore estate without feeling like she was managing her own invisibility. It was a small thing. It was enormous. They left Virginia 3 days later. She had said what needed to be said to her father. The notebooks were on the desk. She had walked him through the most urgent items she had made him promise in writing to contact the Richmond Bank within the week. Whether he would follow through was not something she could control. She had done what she could. She was letting the rest go. Caroline came to her room the morning of her departure. She knocked this time and waited. "Come in," Abigail said. Her sister came in and sat on the edge of the bed. Sat this time, instead of going to the window, and she looked at Abigail's packed trunk and her organized boxes and the bare surfaces of the room that had held 24 years of a life. "I'm not good at this," Caroline said. "No," Abigail agreed. "I'm not going to apologize for—" Caroline stopped, started again. "I can't apologize for the whole of it. There's too much." "I know, but I'm sorry for some of it." She said it like it cost her something. "I'm sorry for what I said about you at the Aldrich dinner last spring. I'm sorry for the portrait. That was me, not Father. I asked him to move it because—" She stopped again. "Because it was easier not to look at me," Abigail said. Caroline's jaw tightened. "Because looking at you made me feel something I didn't want to feel." "What did it make you feel?" Her sister was quiet for a moment. "Like maybe I wasn't as good as I thought I was," she said, very quietly. "Because you were always there doing the things that actually mattered, and nobody was looking, and you just kept doing them anyway." She shook her head. "I don't understand how you do that." Abigail looked at her sister. "You learn," she said. "When nobody is watching, you learn to do things because they need to be done. Not because anyone is going to see." Caroline said nothing for a moment. "Will you write?" she asked. "Yes," Abigail said. "Will you tell me if you're all right?" "Yes." Caroline stood. She moved toward the door. She stopped and turned back and opened her mouth to say something, and then didn't, and instead she crossed the room in 2 quick steps and put her arms around her sister in a hug that was brief and unpracticed and real. Abigail held her. just for a moment. Then Caroline let go and left the room quickly, the way people leave rooms when they don't want to be seen crying, and Abigail stood in the middle of her bare room and breathed. Carter's Crossing was 40 minutes from town by horse, and the road was indeed bad. She noticed on the ride in from the main road that the fence lines were straight and well maintained, that the fields were clearly managed by someone who understood what they were doing, that the workers they passed touched their hats but did not have the hollow look of men who are afraid of the people they work for. She noticed Carter watching her notice all of this. "The housekeeper," he said. "Mrs. Oren. She'll want to show you the house herself. I'd let her. She's particular about it." "I'll let her," Abigail said. "The Northfield foreman is named Tate. He's been here 18 years and he'll test you. He does it with everyone. Ask him about the soil composition in the North Quadrant. He's been tracking it himself for 12 years, and nobody's ever asked him about it. He'll warm up fast." She looked at him. "You've thought about this." "I think about most things," he said. "It's a habit." She looked back at the fields. "The accounts," she said. "How often do you want reports?" "Weekly is fine. Monthly for anything that isn't urgent." He paused. "I'll want to look at them with you, not to check your work. I want to understand what you're seeing." She turned that over in her mind. Not to check your work. 4 words that contained, she thought, more respect than she'd received in the last 6 years. "All right," she said. The main house was large and plainly furnished and aggressively practical, and she liked it immediately in a way she had not expected. No portrait gallery, no receiving rooms designed purely for display. The front hall had coat hooks and a boot bench and a large practical table that someone had clearly been using to sort correspondence. The kitchen was enormous. The south-facing windows were the kind that were actually left open in summer rather than kept shut for the sake of curtains. Mrs. Oren was small and sharp-eyed and 60 years old, and she met Abigail in the front hall with the assessed look of a woman who had been running an establishment single-handedly and was cautiously, reservedly willing to share the work if, and only if, the newcomer proved competent. "Mrs. Carter," she said. The name landed strangely. Not badly, just strangely. New. "Mrs. Oren," Abigail said. "I'd very much like to see the house if you're willing to show me." Something shifted in the older woman's expression. Not a smile, but adjacent to one. "This way," she said. Yeg. The trouble started on the 4th week. She had been at Carter's Crossing long enough to have found her footing, long enough to have had the conversation with Tate about the soil composition in the North Quadrant, which had gone exactly as Carter predicted. Long enough to have reorganized the household accounts into a system that Reston, the ledger man, could actually follow, long enough to have found the 3 places where money was being lost to inefficiency rather than fraud, and proposed corrections for all 3. She had been there long enough, in other words, to have stopped feeling like a visitor, which was precisely when the letter arrived from Virginia. Carter brought it to her himself. He found her in the room she had taken over for accounts, a real office this time, with windows on 2 sides and a door that locked, and he set it on the desk in front of her without a word. She looked at his face before she looked at the letter, and she saw something there she didn't like. Controlled. Too controlled. The particular stillness of a man who has already read something and is managing his reaction to it. "You read it," she said. "It was addressed to me," he said. "Your father wrote to me." She looked at the letter. She picked it up and read it. It was 2 pages. Her father's handwriting, which she knew as well as her own, controlled and elegant, in the formal portions, getting looser toward the end, in the way it did when he was agitated. The first page concerned business, the estate a request for advice on the Richmond notes, a stiff paragraph acknowledging Carter's influence in the regional banking community, and suggesting obliquely that Carter might be positioned to speak a word on the Whitmore family's behalf. The second page was about Abigail. He had written with the particular careful language of a man constructing something that could be denied later, that he was concerned his daughter may have entered the arrangement under a misapprehension of her own suitability. That she had always been a capable girl, but perhaps not entirely suited to the demands of a large establishment. that he felt it was his paternal duty to make Carter aware that Abigail had a history of overestimating her abilities, and that he hoped Carter would be patient with her limitations. She set the letter down. She was very quiet for a moment. "Abigail," Carter said, "he's asking you to let him off the financial hook," she said. Her voice came out even. She was working at keeping it that way. "And he's hedging his position by undermining mine. In case you decide later that the marriage was a mistake, he wants it on record that he warned you." "Yes," Carter said. "That's what he's doing. He's covering himself." "Yes." She looked at the letter on the desk. "And," she said. "And nothing," Carter said. "I wanted you to see it because you have a right to know what your father is saying. I'm not doing anything with it. I don't put weight on a man's assessment of someone when the man has spent 20 years failing to see that person clearly." He paused. "I put weight on what I see myself." She looked at him. Something was happening in her chest, something tight and complicated, the specific emotional architecture of a person who has been spoken about, rather than to for so long that being spoken to feels startling. Like a sound in an empty room. "He's frightened," she said. "Yes, he read the notebooks." She said it slowly. "He saw how much I'd been carrying. And now he's—" She stopped. "He doesn't know how to be grateful, so he's being preemptive. If things go wrong here, it won't be his fault. He'll have warned you." "That's a generous interpretation," Carter said. "It's an accurate one," she said. "He's not a bad man. He's a frightened one who never learned the difference between protecting himself and protecting the people he was supposed to protect." Carter was quiet for a moment. "What do you want me to write back?" he said. She looked at him. "What I want is for you to write back on the business matter only. Refer him to the regional contact at the Richmond Bank. I put his name in the second notebook. Tell him the restructure is straightforward if he's honest about the numbers. Don't mention the rest of the letter." "You want me to ignore what he said about you?" "I want you to not reward it with acknowledgement," she said. "There's a difference." He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his expression that she was beginning to recognize the particular quality of his attention when he was seeing something he respected. "All right," he said. He took the letter back. He left. She sat at the desk and breathed slowly and did not let herself feel the full weight of it. Not yet. Not here, not in the account room where she needed to be clear-headed. Later, she thought. She would feel it properly later. She opened the ledger. She went back to work. The first real test came 6 weeks in. A dispute between two of the mill workers had been building for weeks before she arrived. She learned this from Mrs. Oren, who told her in the matter-of-fact tone of a woman reporting weather, not gossip. Two men, a senior operator named Croft and a younger one named Marsh, had been at odds over a promotion that Croft believed he'd been passed over for unfairly. The tension had spread through the mill crew, the way tension always does in close quarters invisibly, and everywhere at once, until the morning Croft knocked Marsh's equipment off the workbench in front of 6 witnesses, and the whole thing came to a head. Carter handled the immediate situation, separated the men, got the mill running again, told both of them he'd deal with it properly by end of day. Then he came to find Abigail. She was in the north field with Tate, who had, as predicted, warmed up entirely once she'd asked the right question, and then actually listened to the answer for 45 minutes. She saw Carter coming and excused herself. "Mill situation," she said before he could speak. "You heard." "Mrs. Oren," she said. "What happened before this?" "The promotion. Who made the decision?" "Reston, nominally. I signed off on it without looking closely enough." He paused. "Marsh is younger and faster. Croft has been here longer and trained half the current crew. The right answer was probably a different kind of recognition for Croft rather than the same promotion going elsewhere." "Has anyone told Croft that his training record is valued?" Carter was silent for a moment. "Not formally." "Then that's where you start," she said. "Not with the incident. Start with the thing that caused it. Call Croft in privately. Not to discipline him, he knows he was wrong, and he's probably been sitting with it all morning. Tell him what he actually is to this operation. Tell him specifically. The names of the people he trained, the years he's put in, the fact that the mill runs the way it does because of him." She paused. "Then deal with the incident. In that order." Carter looked at her. "You've dealt with this kind of thing before." "Not at a mill," she said. "But yes, same principle everywhere. People don't act out of nowhere. They act out of something that's been ignored." He nodded slowly. "Will you come?" he said. She blinked. "To the mill. To the meeting with Croft. I want him to see that it's not just me saying it, that it's official, that it's the household recognizing it." She understood what he was doing. He was making her visible. Not in the Whitmore parlor sense, not for the benefit of 30 social observers, but in the way that actually mattered in the operations of his estate, in the room where the real decisions happened. "Yes," she said. "I'll come." Croft was a large, weathered man of about 50, with hands that had spent 3 decades around heavy machinery, and a face that had been carefully arranged into the expression of someone expecting punishment. He came into Carter's office and stood, and did not sit until Carter told him to, and then he sat on the edge of the chair like a man who was prepared to leave quickly. Carter talked first. He said what Abigail had told him to say, but he said it in his own words, which were spare and direct and exactly right for a man like Croft. He listed the names. He said the years. He said the mill ran the way it did because of the men who had been there long enough to know its particular demands and moods, and that Croft was the most important of those men, and should have been told that clearly long before today. Croft sat very still through all of this. When Carter finished, there was a silence. Abigail said, "Mr. Croft, the decision on the promotion should have been explained to you at the time. That was an oversight, and I take responsibility for not catching it earlier in my review of the personnel records." Croft looked at her. He had the look of a man adjusting to something unexpected. "I reviewed the training records last week," she continued. "You've worked with 11 men who are now in senior positions on this estate. That's not a small thing. I'd like to discuss a formal recognition of that, a title change at minimum, and a compensation adjustment to match it." Croft said nothing for a moment. "Ma'am," he said finally, "I didn't expect—" He stopped. "I know," she said. "We should have been clearer sooner. We won't make the same mistake again." After Croft left, Carter stood at the window and was quiet for a moment. "You took responsibility," he said, "for a decision that wasn't yours." "It was the household's decision," she said. "I'm part of the household now. The accountability belongs to us both." He turned from the window. He looked at her with an expression that had been changing. She realized that had been changing gradually over the 6 weeks she had been here. The way light changes over the course of a day, slowly and thoroughly, and in a direction that did not reverse. "Yes," he said. "It does." 10. The letter from Caroline arrived the following week, and it was the one that changed everything. Not because of what it said about Caroline, because of what it said about their father. William Whitmore had done something Abigail had not anticipated. Something that no amount of careful planning or organized notebooks had prepared her for. He had taken the information in the 4th notebook, the discrepancies, the secondary ledger, the documented evidence against Griggs, the mill manager, and instead of acting on it quietly and legally, he had confronted Griggs in public at the mill in front of the workers, with the particular theatrical fury of a man who needed to be seen doing something decisive. Griggs had not gone quietly. He had lawyers, apparently, a brother-in-law who practiced in Richmond, and he had filed a counterclaim not about the theft which was documented and real, but about the estate's debts, which were also real, and which Griggs's lawyer had now made public record by attaching them to the counterclaim filing. The Whitmore estate's financial situation was now a matter of public county record. Half the county knew by the end of the week. "Father," Abigail said aloud, to the empty room in the particular tone of a woman who had left detailed written instructions for a situation that had nonetheless gone wrong in the one way she hadn't written down. She read the rest of Caroline's letter. Caroline had written it fast. The handwriting was rushed, and the sentences ran into each other, and there was a quality to it underneath the practical recounting of events that was pure fear wearing the costume of information. Abby? I don't know what to do. Father won't talk to me. Half of our creditors have already sent letters. Mrs. Aldrich hasn't called in a week, which means she knows. And if she knows, then everyone knows. I don't have... The letter broke off there and resumed in a slightly different hand, like she'd put it down and come back to it. He keeps saying he handled it. He keeps saying Griggs will be held accountable. I think he doesn't understand that even if Griggs is held accountable, the whole county now knows about the money. Abby, I'm scared. Abigail folded the letter. She sat very still. She thought about the notebooks on the desk and the careful fourth one with its cross-referenced figures and the note on top addressed to her father. She thought about the month and a half she had spent writing things down with the specific hope that having them written down would mean they would be handled correctly. She thought about her father's particular pride. The way he had come into the account room and sat on the bench by the wall and looked at her chair with its ghost of her mother in it. The way he had said, "I'm sorry" at the door. The way a man can understand something and still not be able to change the reflex of a lifetime. She got up. She went to find Carter. He was at the north fence with Tate, looking at a section of fencing that needed replacing before fall. She came across the field, and he looked up, and something in her face made him hand the fence pliers to Tate without looking and walk to meet her. She gave him the letter. He read it. He read it twice. "How bad is it?" he said. "Bad enough that the creditors will move faster now that it's public record," she said. "The Griggs counterclaim buys Griggs time and costs my father time he doesn't have. The bank will see it as increased risk." Can the bank be managed? Possibly. She thought through it. If someone with standing in the regional banking community made contact, personally, before the creditors start coordinating. He looked at her. She looked at him. "That's why you're telling me," he said. "I'm telling you because it's your decision," she said. "The Whitmore estate's problems are not your obligation. My father made choices I warned him about. The consequences are his to bear." She paused. "But my sister is in that house, and she didn't make those choices." Carter was quiet. The field around them was loud with summer insects whined through the tall grass, the distant sound of the mill. Normal sounds. The sounds of an estate that was functioning the way it was supposed to. "Your father," Carter said. "If I help him, what does that do between you and him?" She thought about it honestly. "I don't know," she said. "He doesn't deserve it. He won't entirely understand it. He might even take it as confirmation that his own judgment was sound, and he only needed the right help." She paused. "But Caroline deserves to have a home. And the workers on that estate, the hands, the mill workers, the house staff, they didn't choose a man like my father. They just work for him." Carter was quiet for a long moment. "All right," he said. "Carter, the people who work the land," he said, "shouldn't pay for the mistakes of the man who owns it. That's a principle I've lived by since I was 20 years old and started buying up land that bad owners had run into the ground." He folded the letter and handed it back. "I'll write to the bank today. I'll send a man to Richmond by week's end." She looked at him. He had said it the way he said everything plainly without drama, as though it were simply the next sensible thing. "Why?" she said. He looked at her. "Because it's the right thing." "That's not all of it," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because you would do it yourself if you could, and because—" He stopped. He looked toward the north fence line, then back at her. "Because you've been doing the right thing by everyone in your life for a very long time, without anyone doing it back. And I find I don't want to be another person who lets that go unnoticed." The field was loud and warm, and the sun was high, and she stood in the middle of it and felt something she had been pressing down for 6 weeks rise up without permission. She did not cry, but it was a near thing. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. The way he nodded when something was settled, and he didn't need to add to it. He went back to Tate and the fence line, and Abigail stood in the north field of Carter's Crossing, Kentucky, in the summer of 1816, with her sister's frightened letter in her hand and the sound of a working estate all around her, and she felt for the first time in a very long time that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because the circumstances were easy, but because she was standing in them with someone who would not walk away. Carter's letter to the Richmond bank went out the same afternoon. He did not ask Abigail to read it before he sent it. He brought it to her finished, folded, sealed, and said, "I want you to know what I said," and read it aloud to her standing in the account room doorway. It was 3 paragraphs. Direct, specific, and written in the language of a man who understood that bankers respond to clarity and demonstrated competence and nothing else. He named the restructure terms he considered reasonable. He named his own relationship with the regional banking office and made it clear without theatrics that his interest in the Whitmore estate's stability was personal and ongoing. He did not mention Abigail by name. She noticed that. "You left me out of it," she said. "I left you out of it because your father's creditors don't need to know your business," he said. "My name carries weight with the bank. Yours shouldn't have to be used to fix what he broke." She thought about that for a moment. "He won't understand why you did this," she said. "He'll think it's about the family connection, about protecting the Carter name from association with a failed estate." "Let him think that," Carter said. "It doesn't matter why he thinks I did it. It matters that it gets done." He left for Richmond 2 days later. He was gone for 6 days. Those 6 days were the first time Abigail had been alone at Carter's Crossing, and she discovered something she had not expected. She was not uncomfortable. She had thought she might be. She had thought the unfamiliarity of the place and the weight of everything happening in Virginia, and the particular strangeness of being the only person with authority in a household that was not yet entirely hers would add up to something anxious. Instead, it added up to something that felt almost like calm. Mrs. Orrin ran the house the way she always did, and Abigail did not interfere with that. Tate managed the Northfield crew and checked in with her each morning with a report that was getting more detailed each week, because he had figured out, in the way observant people figure things out, that she actually read the reports and thought about them and came back with real questions. Reston the ledger man was the most difficult. He came to her on the 3rd day with a payment authorization that he wanted signed, and he stood on the other side of the desk and held the paper in a way that communicated without words his uncertainty about whether she had the authority to sign it. She looked at the paper. She looked at him. "Is there something unclear about the authorization?" she said. "Mr. Carter usually—" "Mr. Carter is in Richmond," she said. "The estate operates in his absence. This payment is within the operating budget. The vendor is in good standing, and the work it covers is already scheduled." She picked up her pen. "Is there something factually wrong with the authorization, Mr. Reston?" He was quiet for a moment. "No, ma'am." "Then let's proceed." She signed it. He took the paper. At the door, he stopped. "Mrs. Carter," he said. "For what it's worth, the accounts since you arrived. They're the clearest I've seen them." She looked up. He was already through the door. She sat with that for a moment. Then she went back to work. Carter came back on a Thursday. He came back with a letter from the Richmond Bank and a secondary letter from a contact of his in the county recorder's office, and he came to find her in the account room, and he sat down in his chair, and he looked at her with the expression of a man who has news and is arranging which part of it to deliver first. "The bank agreed to the restructure," he said. Something loosened in her chest. "Terms. Close to what I asked. The interest rate is higher than I wanted, but the repayment window is reasonable. Your father will have to make actual changes to the estate operations. He can't just service the debt and continue as before. The bank has made that clear in writing. He won't like that." "No," Carter said. "But he doesn't have a choice about it." He paused. "I met with him." She went still. "In Richmond. He came down when he heard I was there. I didn't invite him. He came." Carter looked at her steadily. "He wanted to thank me." "How did he do it?" "Badly," Carter said. "He spent the first 10 minutes telling me about his plan for the estate going forward, which was mostly a reworked version of things he'd been doing before, and I listened to it, and then I told him that the bank's conditions required specific operational changes, and that I had some recommendations." He paused. He didn't love hearing that. No, she said. He came around to it, Carter said. Eventually. He's not a stupid man, your father. He has a very strong preference for the version of events where his judgment was correct all along. He held her gaze. He asked about you. Abigail said nothing. He asked if you were settled. If things were going well. Carter's voice was careful. I think he was asking if you were unhappy. I think he wanted maybe to hear that things hadn't worked out well. Not because he wished you ill, but because if things worked out well, Abigail said quietly, then he has to live with what he wasted. Carter was quiet. What did you tell him? She said. I told him you were the best thing that had happened to that estate since I bought it, Carter said, and that I reckoned he already knew that, which was why the question was hard to ask. She looked at him. He looked back. That wasn't diplomatic, she said. No, he agreed, but it was true. Chohe. The second letter, the one from the county recorder's contact, was the one that kept her up that night. It was not about her father, it was about Griggs. The counterclaim that Griggs's brother-in-law lawyer had filed had been doing more damage than she had understood from Caroline's first letter. The public record of the Whitmore debts was one thing, but the counterclaim itself contained a specific allegation that was not about the theft which was documented and real, but about the notebooks. Griggs's lawyer had argued, and this was the part that made her read the paragraph 3 times, that the records documenting the theft had been fabricated. That the notebooks were not legitimate estate documents, but the work of an interested party seeking to deflect blame from the estate's true financial mismanagement. He had not named Abigail directly. He had referred with the careful language of legal misdirection to recently compiled documentation of uncertain provenance that had been produced after the fact by parties with a direct financial interest in the outcome. She was the party with a direct financial interest. She was the one who had compiled the documentation. And the argument, however dishonest, was not entirely without strategic logic. She had left Virginia. She had married into money. If Griggs's lawyer could convince the county that the notebooks were a manufactured case designed to protect the Whitmore family from accountability for their own bad management. She set the letter down. She picked it up again. She read it a 4th time. The thing about careful, organized records is that they are also, she thought, very easy to question if the person questioning them understands how records work. A notebook compiled by an unmarried daughter with no official standing in the estate's operations. Undated in places she had dated most entries, but not all. Written in a single hand, hers without countersignature from the estate manager or her father or anyone with formal authority. She had done it correctly, she thought. She had done it as carefully as she knew how. But she had done it alone, the way she had done everything alone, and alone meant no witness, and no witness meant a lawyer with a point to make could stand up in a county court and ask a jury of men who had never met her to take the word of a woman who had left the state over the word of a man who had been on that estate for 10 years. She sat at the desk in the dark account room and felt the first real spike of fear she had felt since she left Virginia. Then she thought. She thought for a long time, and then she went to find Mrs. Orrin. And Mrs. Orrin was in the kitchen, as she always was in the late evening, doing the small final accounting of the day's household expenditure that she had apparently done every night for 12 years. She looked up when Abigail came in, and something in Abigail's face made her set down her pen without being asked. "Sit," Mrs. Orrin said. Abigail sat. "Tell me," Mrs. Orrin said. She told her. All of it. The notebooks, the counterclaim, the legal argument, the specific vulnerability of documentation compiled by someone without official standing. Mrs. Orrin listened without interrupting, which was its own kind of gift. When Abigail finished, the older woman was quiet for a moment. "The mill records," Mrs. Orrin said. "What about them?" "The Whitmore mill, it sold product to buyers across 3 counties. Those buyers received invoices." She looked at Abigail steadily. Invoices that would have reflected the legitimate output. If the actual output was consistently lower than what you documented in your notebooks, if Griggs was reporting higher production than the mill actually delivered, then the buyer records won't match the official ledgers. Abigail stopped. She thought about this. You can't fabricate buyer records, she said slowly. They're held by the buyers. Merchants, mill customers, grain brokers, scattered across 3 counties. No, Mrs. Oren said. You cannot fabricate those. And if the discrepancy between the official ledgers and the buyer records matches the discrepancy in my notebooks, then your notebooks aren't uncertain provenance, Mrs. Oren said. They're corroborated. Abigail sat for a moment with the shape of it. How do you know about mill invoices? She said. My husband ran a grain operation for 20 years before he died, Mrs. Oren said. I kept the books. Of course she had. I need to write to Caroline tonight, Abigail said. Tell her what to look for. Tell her what to collect. She was already standing. The buyer contact records, they would have been kept in the mill office, not the estate office. Griggs would have had them, but some of them would have been sent copies to the estate for tax purposes. Will she be able to find them? If they're there, she'll find them. She paused. Carolyn knows that house better than anyone. She spent 20 years learning which drawer has which key. Mrs. Oren looked at her for a moment. You trust her. Abigail thought about this honestly. I trust that she's scared enough right now to do the thing that needs doing, she said. That's sufficient. She went back to the account room and wrote the letter to Caroline in one sitting, 2 pages clear and specific, and written as if Caroline were completely capable of executing the instructions, because she was, Abigail thought, if she believed she was. She sealed it. She found Carter. He was in the front room, with a map of the North Field spread across the table, making notes in the margin in his cramped, practical handwriting. He looked up. She told him about the counterclaim. He listened without moving. When she finished, she showed him Mrs. Oren's logic about the buyer records. He read the letter she'd written to Caroline. Then he folded it and said, I'll send it with my fastest rider at first light. Carter. You found the solution, he said. You always find the solution. I'm sending the letter. She looked at him across the table with its spread map and its marginal notes. She thought about what it meant to have found at 24 years old, after a lifetime of solving problems in rooms where no one acknowledged the solving a person who acknowledged it. Not with ceremony, not with grand speeches, just with you found the solution. I'm sending the letter. It was, she thought, more than most people got. All right, she said. Bakul. The rider went at dawn. 3 days later, Caroline wrote back. She had found them. Not just some of them, all of them. 22 months of buyer invoices organized in a locked metal box in the back of the mill office that Griggs had apparently not bothered to destroy because he had not believed anyone would know to look there. She had taken the box to the county magistrate herself with their father's formal authorization before she wrote the letter. Caroline's handwriting was different in this letter. Steadier, less frightened. I told the magistrate they were official estate records and that we were formally entering them into evidence against the counterclaim. He asked me if I understood what I was doing. I told him I understood perfectly. He looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to believe me. I stared at him until he took the box. Abby. I think I understand now what you've been doing all these years. I don't know how you stood it. Abigail read that paragraph twice. She showed it to Carter. He read it and said, your sister. Yes. She did that herself. She did. He was quiet for a moment. You wrote her like she could. She could, Abigail said. She just needed someone to say so. He looked at her. She looked back. They had been doing this more often. She noticed this particular exchange of looks that held more than the words around them. She was not entirely sure what to do with it yet. She was not a woman who rushed toward things she couldn't name, but she was aware of it in the specific way you become aware of a change in the weather before you can identify exactly what has changed. The magistrate, she said. Once he has the invoices, how long before the counterclaim falls apart? If the discrepancy is as clean as you think it is, Carter said, not long. The lawyer will see the invoices and pull the counterclaim rather than let it go to a full hearing. He's not going to stand up in court and argue against documented buyer records. Too many witnesses, too many signatures. He paused. Griggs is going to be looking at restitution. And my father's position with the bank. Improved, Carter said, significantly. The counterclaim was the thing creating the most uncertainty. Without it, the restructure holds. She nodded slowly. She thought about her father in Richmond being thanked and hating how it felt. She thought about Caroline staring down a magistrate with a metal box of invoices and someone in her corner believing she could do it. I should write to her, Abigail said. To Caroline. Yes. Carter agreed. I should tell her. She stopped. She thought about what she wanted to say. I should tell her that what she did mattered, that it wasn't just useful, that she did something real. Yes, Carter said again. You should. It was the end of July when the third letter arrived, and this one was not from Caroline. It was from a man named Harlan Bryce. She did not know the name. Carter, when she brought him the letter, went very still when he read it in a way that she had learned to read as meaning something significant. Who is he? She said. He was a business partner of mine, Carter said. About 4 years ago, we had a joint land claim on a section of river property west of here. It fell through. He set the letter on the desk. We did not part well. What does he want? He's made a complaint to the county land office, Carter said. He's claiming that a section of the Carter's Crossing north boundary is incorrectly recorded, that the original survey was flawed, and that a parcel of approximately 40 acres that is currently held as Carter land belongs on his side of the line. Abigail took the letter and read it herself. 40 acres, she said. It's not about the acres, Carter said. The north boundary runs along the river. If his claim is upheld, he gets access to the river channel that currently feeds the mill operations. He doesn't want the land. He looked at her. He wants the water. Why now? Carter was quiet for a moment. His jaw was set in the way it set when he was managing something. Because of you, he said. She stopped. I beg your pardon. He knows I married, Carter said. Word travels fast in this county. He knows I married, and he knows you came from Virginia, and he knows what your family's situation was. He picked up the letter again. He's known for years that the boundary survey had a question in it. He never pressed it because he knew I'd fight it and I'd win. But now? Now he thinks you're distracted, she said. Now he thinks my attention is divided and my resources are stretched, Carter said. Between the mill repairs and the North Field project and whatever he's heard about the Virginia situation. He set the letter down. He's wrong. But he doesn't know he's wrong yet. She stood for a moment. The original survey, she said. Do we have it? Filed with the county recorder. Yes. And the competing claim, what is it based on? A different survey. He's citing an earlier one, pre-purchase, before I acquired the land. Which would have been commissioned by whom? Carter looked at her. The previous owner. Who sold you the land? Yes. And who presumably had reason to want the survey to show the boundary favorably for sale purposes, she said. Something moved through Carter's expression. Slow and then fast, the way things move when a connection catches. The original survey might be wrong, he said. The original survey might be wrong in a way that favors you, she said, which means Bryce's earlier survey might actually be closer to accurate. She paused. Or the original survey is correct and Bryce is bluffing. How do we know which? She thought for a moment. We commission an independent survey, she said. Now, immediately, before Bryce gets the land office moving on his claim. If we come in with an independent survey that corroborates our boundary, the land office is going to weight that heavily against a man citing a 40-year-old document. And if it doesn't corroborate our boundary, then we know that before the hearing instead of during it, she said. And we adjust. Carter looked at her for a long moment. You don't panic, he said. Not usually, she said. It doesn't help. No, he agreed. It doesn't. He was still looking at her with that expression, the one that had been changing, the one she couldn't entirely name. Abigail. It was the first time he had used her first name. Not Mrs. Carter, not Miss Whitmore. Her name. She felt it land somewhere it hadn't quite reached before. "Yes," she said. "This arrangement we made," he said. He said it carefully, the way he said things he was thinking through as he went. "The 1-year contract." "Yes." "I want to revisit it." She held very still. "I want to revisit the terms," he said. "Specifically the part that says either party can choose to dissolve it after 12 months. The account room was very quiet. "All right," she said. Her voice came out steady. She was working at that. "I don't want to dissolve it," he said. "I want to make it—" He stopped. He looked at the desk, then back at her. "I'm not a man who is easy to live with. I know that. I'm not easy with people in general, and I don't talk the way some men talk. About the things that matter." "I've noticed," she said. "But I notice things," he said. "I've been noticing things since the morning I walked across your east field with you and you told me about the stones in the creek bed. I noticed how you moved through that house that night before the party, like someone who'd learned to take up as little space as possible. I noticed how you talked about the land like you loved it without ever using that word. I noticed the way your sister looked at you when she thought no one was watching, like she didn't know what to do with the fact that you were—" He stopped again. "Were what?" she said quietly. "We're better than all of it," he said. "Better than the house and the parties and the family and the whole machinery of it. Just better." He looked at her straight. "I noticed all of that before I asked to call on you, and I have been noticing more since you got here. Every day." He paused. "I want to make the arrangement permanent, Abigail. Not because the estate needs you, though it does. Because I—" He stopped one more time, the longest stop yet, "because I find I can't imagine it without you in it." The quiet between them held everything. She thought about the east field in the early morning. She thought about the chair nobody sat in. She thought about not to check your work, and you found the solution, and I'll send the letter and 4 notebooks on a desk and a writer at dawn, and her sister staring down a magistrate. She thought about what it meant to be seen, not performed, for not arranged around, not managed and minimized. Just seen. Specifically. Accurately. By someone who paid attention because he wanted to, not because he was supposed to. "The survey," she said. He blinked. "We should get the survey commissioned today," she said. "The Bryce matter won't wait." He looked at her. "And after that," she said, "we can revisit the terms." Something happened in his face. Something that was not quite a smile, but was what came just before one, the particular expression of a man who has heard yes in something that hadn't quite used the word yet. "Today then," he said. "Today." She agreed. He picked up his hat. At the door he stopped and looked back at her, and she was already reaching for the account ledger, and she did not look up. But she was smiling. And he saw it. And neither of them said anything about it, because some things she had learned didn't need to be said to be completely understood. The surveyor came the next morning. His name was Edmund Pratt, and he had been doing land surveys in Kentucky for 30 years, and he came with 2 assistants and a level of professional seriousness that communicated without words that he had seen every variety of boundary dispute the state had to offer and was not impressed by any of them. Carter met him at the north fence line at 7 in the morning. Abigail was already there. Pratt looked at her, then at Carter, then back at her. "Mrs. Carter will be present for the survey," Carter said. It was not a question. "As you like," Pratt said, and moved on without further commentary, which Abigail appreciated. They walked the north boundary for 4 hours. Pratt worked methodically, measuring and marking and cross-referencing against both the current recorded survey and the older document that Bryce had cited in his complaint. He did not share his conclusions as he went. He made notes in a leather-bound book and spoke to his assistants in the shorthand of people who have worked together long enough to communicate in half sentences, and Abigail watched and listened and did not ask questions she already knew he wouldn't answer mid-survey. Carter walked beside her and did not say much. At one point near the river channel, Pratt stopped and looked at a section of bank and then at his notes, and then at the section of bank again, and something in the quality of his stillness changed. Abigail noticed it. She glanced at Carter. He had noticed it too. They waited. Pratt made 3 more measurements. Then he said to no one in particular, "Well." "Mr. Pratt," Carter said. Pratt looked up. "The original survey has an error," he said. The benchmark point was recorded incorrectly off by approximately 12 feet to the west, over the full length of the north boundary that compounds. He looked at Carter steadily. "The current recorded line puts you about 23 feet further north than your actual boundary." The air went quiet. 23 feet, Carter said. "Averaged across the full run. More in some places, less in others." Pratt closed his book. "The 40 acres Bryce is claiming he's not wrong about the discrepancy. He is wrong about the remedy. The error runs in both directions along this section. You lose some acreage to his side, but the river channel..." He paused. "The river channel sits on your side regardless. The benchmark error doesn't move it far enough to cross the line, even with the correction applied." Abigail breathed. "The mill water," she said. "Stays yours," Pratt said. "Yes, ma'am." Carter stood at the riverbank and was very still for a moment. Then he said, "Get me the corrected survey in writing by end of week." "I'll have it to you by Thursday," Pratt said. He went back to his work. Carter turned to Abigail. She looked at him. "The 23 feet, she said. "That goes in Bryce's favor on the land record. You'll have to acknowledge it." "Yes, he gets less than he claimed, but he gets something." "Yes." Carter's jaw was set, but his voice was level. "That's the honest outcome." "He'll take it," she said. "He'll say he was right about the error and use it however he can publicly. He'll make noise about it." "Let him make noise," Carter said. "The mill runs. The water is ours. The rest is his feelings about the matter, and I don't have time for other men's feelings." He said it with the absolute flatness of a man who meant every word. And Abigail thought not for the first time that there was something genuinely restful about a person who knew exactly what mattered and refused to be distracted by everything that didn't. "You're going to write to Bryce," she said. "Today," he agreed. "Ahead of the formal survey filing. I'm not going to let him find out through the land office. I'll tell him myself." "He won't expect that." "No," Carter said. "He won't." She looked at the river. The water was moving quickly over the stones near the bank, clear and cold-looking. Even in the July heat, the sound of it constant and unhurried, the way water sounds when it has been running the same course for longer than anyone alive can remember. "Nathaniel," she said. It was the first time she had used his name. He turned and looked at her, and she saw in his face the same thing she had felt in herself when he had used hers, a small specific landing, like something finding its right place. "The survey," she said. "I want to commission one for the Whitmore estate." He was quiet. "I know it's not my—" She stopped, started again. "I know the Whitmore estate is not your responsibility. But if the same kind of benchmark error exists there, and it might surveys from that period were inconsistent, then my father's landholdings might be different than recorded. Better or worse. He should know." Carter watched her for a moment. "You're still taking care of it," he said. "I'm not doing it for him," she said. "I'm doing it because that land—" She stopped again. She thought about what she had said to Carter in the East Field the morning she left, about the land not having done anything wrong. Because accurate information is always better than inaccurate information, regardless of whose name is on the deed. Carter nodded once. "I'll arrange it. I'll pay for it. Abigail." "I have the income provision in the contract," she said. "I'll pay for it." He looked at her for a long moment. Something in his expression was soft and steady at the same time, the way things are when they are both. "All right," he said. They walked back from the river together, and neither of them spoke much, and it was the particular comfortable quiet of people who have learned that silence between them is not empty. Dead Deck. The letter from her father arrived on a Wednesday, not dictated to a secretary, not written in the formal controlled hand of a man performing authority. Written in his actual handwriting, the way she had seen it in old letters her mother had kept loose and slightly uneven. The hand of a man who wrote when he was feeling something, rather than when he was managing something. It was one page. She read it in the account room alone, and then she sat with it for a long time. He had written about the bank. The restructure was proceeding, and the county magistrate had formally dismissed the Griggs counterclaim after reviewing the buyer invoices that Caroline had delivered. Griggs was facing restitution proceedings. The mill was under new management. Her father had apparently taken Abigail's written advice and promoted one of the senior workers rather than bringing in an outside manager. Then, the last paragraph. I have been looking at the notebooks you left. I have read them through twice now. I do not have words adequate to what I should say about them, or about the years of work they represent that I did not see, and did not ask about, and did not deserve. I am not good at this, you know that. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see all of it. Your mother would have. She would have known long before I did. I am sorry it took me this long to be the kind of man who could look at his daughter clearly. I hope Kentucky is good to you. I believe it will be because you make things good by the way you work in them. I am proud of you. I should have told you that for 20 years. I am telling you now. She set the letter down. She did not cry. She sat very still for a while, and she let the words exist in the room with her, and she felt the complicated human weight of them too late and real, and hers now, and something she had needed to hear for a very long time, and something that could not undo the years it had taken to arrive. Then she picked up her pen, and she wrote back. She wrote for a long time. Carter read the letter that evening when she showed it to him. He read it once and handed it back and said nothing for a moment. You cried, he said. A little, she said. Good, he said. She looked at him. Not because I wanted you to be sad, he said. Because you've been managing it for a long time. It's good to put it down. She thought about that, about the specific accuracy of it. Managing it. That was exactly what she had been doing for years, with everything she felt about her father and her family, and the house she had run without recognition, and the seat at the end of the table where the candles didn't reach. Managing it. Keeping it operable. Not letting it stop the work. He said he was proud of me, she said. He should have said it 20 years ago, Carter said. Yes. But he said it. Yes. She looked down at the letter in her hands. He said it. Carter was quiet for a moment. Then, are you going to go to visit? She looked up. He didn't ask, she said. In the letter, he didn't ask. No, Carter said. Because he's not sure he has the right to ask. But the question is in it. He held her gaze. You can see it. She could see it. She had seen it the first time she read it, but she had been sitting with the last paragraph and hadn't let herself think past it. It's a long ride to Virginia in August, she said. It is, Carter agreed. The Northfield project isn't finished. Tate can manage it. The Bryce survey filing goes in Thursday with or without you in the county, Carter said. Abigail. He said her name the way he had started saying it, not formal, not performed, just the word exactly as it was. Do you want to go? She sat with the question. Did she want to go? Not should she go, not ought she to go. Not, what would it mean, and what would it cost, and how would it look? Did she want to? I want Caroline to be all right, she said. That's not the question. I want my father to... She stopped. Still not the question, Carter said. She looked at him. I want to see it, she said quietly. I want to see it with different eyes. I want to stand in that account room and in that east field and see it as something I chose to leave rather than something that discarded me. She paused. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, he said. I want to know it didn't win, she said. I want to know that in my body, not just in my head. Then we go, Carter said. She blinked. You don't have to. You're not going back to your father's house alone, he said. Flat. No argument in it, no consultation, just the statement of something already decided. We go together or not at all, that's the end of it. She looked at this man, this plain-spoken, unromantic, deeply practical man, who had sat in the chair nobody sat in, and commissioned a survey the next morning and sent a writer at dawn, and written 3 paragraphs to a bank and called her by her name, and now was telling her without ceremony that he would take her back to the hardest place in her history and stand beside her while she faced it. All right, she said. We leave Monday, he said. Monday, she agreed. Yeah. They arrived in Virginia on a Friday afternoon 7 days after they left Carter's Crossing. The road was long, and the heat was what August heat is in the South. Heavy and deliberate, the kind that makes the air look different and turns every mile into a negotiation. They traveled with 2 of Carter's men, and they stopped each night at coaching inns, and in the evenings, they sat together in whatever passed for a common room, and ate whatever was available, and Carter drank his coffee. Black, and Abigail drank tea, and they talked, in the unhurried way of people with no audience and nothing to perform about the things that were actually on their minds. On the 3rd night in a room above a coaching inn, somewhere in the long middle of the journey, she told him about her mother. She had not talked about her mother in years. There was no one who had wanted to listen. But Carter listened the way he always listened, not waiting for his turn, not steering toward a response, just actually taking in what she was saying and letting her say all of it. And she talked for an hour and a half in the dim lamplight about Eleanor Whitmore, who had sat at the account room desk and taught her daughter to look at numbers like they were telling a story, who had known every worker on the estate by name, who had died in the spring when Abigail was 13, and left a shape in the world that nothing had filled correctly since. When she finished, Carter was quiet for a moment. She would have liked Kentucky, he said. She would have loved it, Abigail said. She would have had opinions about the North Field rotation. Probably right ones, he said. Definitely right ones, she said. She was almost always right about land. He looked at her. Where do you think you got it from? She had never thought about it in those words. She had always thought of it as something she had learned pieced together from following estate managers and reading agricultural correspondence and paying attention. Not something that came from anywhere specific. But she thought about her mother at the desk, and the particular way Eleanor Whitmore had looked at ledger numbers, not like accounting, like a conversation between the land and the people working it. From her, she said quietly. I suppose I got it from her. Carter nodded. He did not add to it, and she was grateful because it was the kind of thing that didn't need adding to. The Whitmore estate looked the same from the road. That was the first thing she noticed, how unchanged it appeared from the outside, the same trees, and the same fence line, and the same long drive, as though the months she had been gone were not real time, but only her imagination of it. The gate was open. One of the stable hands, young Tom, who had been there since he was 14, came out to meet the horses, and he looked at Abigail, and his face broke into a wide, genuine smile. Miss Whitmore, he said, and then caught himself. Mrs. Carter, I mean. Sorry, ma'am. Tom, she said. How's your mother? Better, ma'am. Much better. Thank you for asking. She climbed down. Carter was beside her immediately, not taking her arm in the formal social way, but close. Present. She was aware of him the way you are aware of solid ground. Her father came out of the house. He looked older. Not drastically, not in the way of illness or despair, but in the way of a man who has done a significant amount of reckoning in a short period of time, and reckoning ages you. He stopped at the top of the front steps and looked at her, and she looked at him, and neither of them moved for a moment. Then he came down the steps. He stopped 3 feet in front of her. He looked at Carter, briefly nodded once, and Carter nodded back, and that was sufficient for both of them. Then he looked at his daughter. Abigail, he said. Father, she said. He was quiet for a moment. He looked like a man with a great deal to say, and no reliable way to say any of it. "The East Field," he said finally. "I fixed the rotation." She looked at him. "Last month," he said. "Took your advice. Talked to the workers. Really talked to them. One of the hands fellow named Peters, he'd been on that field for 12 years. Knew exactly what you'd written in the notebook. Said he'd been saying the same thing for 8 years, and nobody listened." He stopped. "I listened." "Good," she said. "The yield projections are already up," he said. "Just from the correction." "They will be," she said. "2 seasons, and it'll be fully improved." He nodded. Another silence. "Come inside," he said. "Please." So, Caroline met her in the front hall. She was different. Abigail saw it immediately, not in the obvious ways, not in her appearance, but in the quality of how she stood. Less performed, less arranged. The particular held-togetherness of someone who has been through something real and come out the other side with less armor on, but more actual structure beneath it. She hugged Abigail before Abigail could say anything. It was a proper hug this time. Long. "You got my letter," Abigail said. "You wrote me like you believed I could do it," Caroline said, her voice slightly muffled. "Because you could," Abigail said. Caroline pulled back and looked at her. "The magistrate," she said. "He looked at me like I was something he'd found in the road. I kept thinking about what you would do. I kept thinking she would not apologize for being here. She would just do the thing that needs doing." She shook her head. "I kept thinking that." Abigail looked at her sister. "You didn't need to think about me," she said. "You would have figured it out." "Maybe," Caroline said. "But I didn't know that yet." She glanced behind Abigail at Carter. "He's exactly what I expected," she said quietly. "What did you expect?" "Someone who would see you," Caroline said, simply, like it was obvious. Wait, the real moment came in the account room. Her father took her there after supper, just the two of them, and he stood in the doorway, the way he had stood in doorways all her life, as though uncertain whether he had the right to enter, and she went to the desk and sat down in her chair, and he came in and sat on the bench by the wall. The notebooks were still on the desk. He had clearly been using them. The pages were turned annotated in places where he had added his own notes in the margins. She ran her fingers along the cover of the first one. "You've been working from them," she said. "Every week," he said. "Is it helping?" "Considerably." He looked at his hands. "The new manager, you'd have suggested the promoted worker, his name is Aldrich. He's good. He knows the equipment the way Griggs knew it, but he's not—" He stopped. "He's honest." "Good," she said. "The bank contact you noted in the second book," he said. "He was exactly who I needed. Straightforward man, no games." He looked up at her. "How did you know who to list?" "I paid attention," she said. "For years. You had correspondence with him 3 times, and each time his letter was clear, and his terms were what he'd said they'd be." She paused. "I notice things." He was quiet. "I know," he said. "I know you do." He looked at the floor. I didn't let myself see how much you noticed, because if I saw it, I would have had to see everything else." He stopped. "I'm not asking you to understand that. I know it's not sufficient." "I understand it," she said. "That's not the same as it being all right." "No," he said. "It's not." They sat in the quiet room, the evening light coming through the windows, the smell of the house she had grown up in, which she had not realized she'd missed until she was back inside it. "The portrait," she said. He stiffened slightly. "I'd like it moved back," she said. "To the front hall." He looked at her. "Not for me," she said. "I don't live here anymore, but because it belongs there. It was put there by my mother, and it should stay where she put it." Her father was very still for a moment. "Yes," he said. "I'll have it moved tomorrow morning." "Good," she said. He stood. He moved toward the door. He stopped, and she thought he would say something, and he didn't say anything for a long time, and she waited, because she had learned that some things could not be rushed into speech. "Your mother used to sit at that desk," he said. "I know. You look like her when you sit there," he said. "Not in your face, in the way you hold yourself when you're working. Like the work matters, like it's worth giving your full attention." He stopped. His voice had gone rough at the edges. "I missed that. For a long time after she died, I missed seeing that, and I didn't. I didn't understand that you were giving it to me every day, and I was looking past it." She let the words sit. "Father," she said. He looked at her. "I forgive you," she said. "Not because the moment required it. Not because it was the thing you were supposed to say. Because she had made the decision somewhere on the long road from Kentucky, in the nights she had lain awake with the journey ahead of her, that she was not going to carry the weight of his failures into the rest of her life. That the account room and the east field and the portrait in the front hall were going to be things she could think about without the acid of long resentment underneath. "I forgive you," she said again. "Not because everything was all right, because I'm not willing to let it be the thing I carry." He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were bright. He did not trust his voice, she thought. He nodded once, then he left. She sat in the account room for a while alone, and felt the particular quiet of a chapter that was genuinely over. Not dramatically, not with the satisfaction of having won something. Just over. Finished. A door that had been standing open for a long time finally closed. She pressed her hand flat on the desk the way she always did when she was grounding herself in something real. Then she stood up and went to find Carter. He was on the front porch. He had been talking to Caroline, apparently, because Caroline was just going inside when Abigail came out, and she gave Abigail a look on her way through the door that contained a small private smile and nothing else. Carter was leaning against the porch rail, looking out at the estate in the evening, the fields and the fence lines and the old tree at the edge of the east field that she had climbed as a child, and that was large enough now to shade a full acre. She stood beside him. "How did it go?" he said. "It went," she said. "That's enough." "For now," she said. "Yes." He nodded. They stood together in the evening, and the estate made its summer sounds around them, and after a while, Carter said without looking at her, "The east field." "What about it?" "Rotation's been fixed." He told me. "The yield projections will be up 2 seasons out," he said. "I know," she said. "You wrote that in the notebook." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You did that." She looked at him. "You wrote it down," he said. "You fixed it. Even after you left. Even after everything." He paused. "The people who work that field are going to benefit from something you did in a room alone with no one watching and no one thanking you, and most of them will never know it was you." He turned to look at her. "That's who you are, Abigail. That's been who you are the whole time." She stood on the porch of her father's house in the evening light, and felt the truth of it move through her, not the grand dramatic truth of stories, but the real kind, the quiet kind, the kind that settles into your bones and stays. "Nathaniel," she said. He looked at her. "I want to go home," she said. He held her gaze. "To Kentucky. To Carter's Crossing," she said. "To the account room and the North Field and Mrs. Orrin and Tate and Reston and the mill and all of it." She paused. "To you." Something happened in his face, something that was not hidden and not performed and not managed, something open and exact and entirely his. "Then we go home," he said. He held out his hand. She took it, not because she needed steadying, not because the moment required a gesture, because she wanted to, and wanting something without apology was a thing she was still learning. And she was learning it here on this porch in this evening with this man. "Monday," she said. "Monday." He agreed. His hand was warm and steady around hers. "We leave at first light." She looked out at the east field, the fixed rotation, the corrected soil, the patient work of land that would give back what was put into it in its own time and not before. She looked at it with the eyes of someone who had chosen to leave. And she felt finally completely in the specific way that comes from standing in the right place at the right time with the right person beside you, that she was free. Not because she had escaped anything, because she had walked through it. Eyes open, work done, head up, and on the other side waiting a life that was entirely, unambiguously, gloriously her own.